And so, he thought to himself, it's Saturday afternoon, and I'm a little bored. I had plans, family plans for this weekend that fell through as a result of a COVID exposure. So I thought to myself, why don't I just try? I want to try and be less precious about what happens on my main channel. Because historically I've been very precious about it, and that doesn't seem to be helping anything. So I thought I'd just do this, just hang out for a little bit and chat. No agenda. I got a box of ASMR stuff here. I'll be taking any questions that anybody wants to ask while I'm doing this stuff. No guarantee that any questions will be answered, but I will do my best. I'll do my best to be as transparent as I can be without, going too far. I also don't want to, obviously, questions that are not mine to answer. I don't want to answer those questions. Maybe I could point you in the right direction. So I'm still working on. I usually get a coffee and work on it almost the better half of a day. Just sip at it. There's barely anything left in here. But here, why don't I do something like this? One of the lovely things that you can do with Ecamm. Let's pop some. You can do this with pretty much any streaming software, but I happen to be a big fan of Ecamm because I can do stuff like this. Have I watched Rings of Power? Oh, it's not centered because I usually have something there. Let's make sure these are centered. Have I watched Rings of Power? No. I have no intention of watching Rings of Power. I didn't even really like the main Lord of the Rings trilogy. I was fine. I enjoyed the first one. Well, actually, so I enjoyed the second one. Everybody loved Return of the King, it seemed, but that's where it lost me. And then definitely with The Hobbit. Honestly, I worked at a play-by-mail Middle-earth Tolkien game doing data entry when I was really young. It was my second job. It was a side hustle. And I think I've got the Bakshi stuff. I've got Silmarillion. I've got, some of the stuff that Chris wrote. I think Chris, his son. Was his son? Am I mistaken that for somebody else? So the Bakshi series, the play-by-mail stuff, the regular trilogy plus Hobbit. Then the Jackson movies. Then the Jackson crappies. I don't think I need to see any more screen adaptations of that material. Being honest, anything that is high fantasy. Wait, high fantasy doesn't bore me, but fantasy bores me. So, in fantasy where magic is sort of the Deus Ex Machina for everything, that's boring to me because in the back of my mind, it's always just sort of like, oh, they're just going to use magic. There's no stakes in my head as I'm watching the stuff, because there's always just the potential to, if you're painted in a corner, magic will save you. One of the reasons when I first read George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones, the first book, and then Storm of Swords, was that the second book? I read the first 3 books, prior to the HBO series coming out. And I was like, this is the kind of fantasy I like, which I think is considered high fantasy, which sounds a little bit contradictory to me. Seems like it should be low fantasy. But worlds in which, and I realized I deviated from this later, but worlds in which when magic happens, it's a big fucking deal. Like, it's like nuclear weapons kind of thing. It's like, oh my God, everybody is freaked out by it. It's not just like your local magician comes through and does a fireworks show with magic. That would not happen in the Game of Thrones book. They would not get licensure from the proper sir. Okay, yeah. So it's been a while since I remember looking into this when I worked at Bethesda. Like, that was required reading was Game of Thrones, right? Along with, of course, like stuff like Michael Moorcock and some other stuff. A lot of stuff I'd already read, but Game of Thrones I hadn't, because, man, look, and I remember being like, hey, you need to check out this book. And I remember going into the bookstore. Let's see if it even exists anymore. The edition of Game of Thrones that I got. Let me see. Yeah, basically, like, yes, this is the covers that I remember. Well, no, they've zhuzhed them up a bit. This is I realize I'm talking about something you don't see just yet. I'm about to show it to you. This is the book. Oh, it's got this in it, but I don't care. I walked into my, maybe it was B. Dalton at the time. No, I don't think it was. I think it was still, wasn't Walden Books. I think it was, probably wasn't Borders. But this was the book, right? And I remember just like looking at this and being like, what the fuck? Really? That's the best they could do for a cover? I'm not enthralled by this. Where's the Vallejo? Or the Ken Kesey? No, not Ken Kesey. Ken Kelly or Frazetta cover, bringing me into this world. No, it was just this. And this was before the series had come out, obviously. So I remember being a little bit trepidatious, might be the word. It was trepidatious. It looked boring, honestly. But then I remember reading the prelude, which set up all these characters, and I was like, oh, all these characters seem interesting. And then they all died at the end of the prelude. Like, literally, the first 20 pages, you're engaged, and you're engaged with these people. Like, it was written in such a way that I was like, ooh, these are the characters? These characters seem great. They didn't seem like throwaway characters, but they were throwaway characters. And I came to learn, obviously, while reading further into the series that, don't get too attached to anybody in this world. And that's part of what made it engaging to me. It was not sitcom-y. And I realize that's kind of the norm now. It wasn't then. Even when Gandalf died, Gandalf lived. And I just found that to make things far less interesting. Am I sick? No. Hi, Katerina. I'm not sick. But somebody in my circle is sick. And so the plans that we had canceled. So here I am here. That's funny. I don't know if that's meant to be funny. Is that meant to be funny? I worked on the Elder Scrolls games for 7 years. Particularly the Elder Scrolls Online. If you play the, well, really like Knarthy's Roost, Deshaun, Green Shade, sort of the high elf starter areas. There's a bunch, and then there's a bunch of areas in. I'm blanking on some of the names now. Rivenspire. Some of the High Rock stuff. There's a bunch of areas that I was in there with. And that was sort of our credo at the time, although obviously, like, you got to have magic being a dime a dozen in an MMO to retain people, I suppose. Sophie Ego. A vid where I was reading Franco's book, you misspelled his name. It's very disrespectful. Did some time codes with moments where you're dying from the book's dumbness. Yeah, that book, that was not an easy book to get through without corpsing. And it's not like something I went back to see if maybe I missed some of the hidden depth there. Well, I worked at ZeniMax, which is the parent company of Bethesda. So ZeniMax owns Bethesda and id Software and a whole bunch of other things. How was it? I really enjoyed it. I had a pretty long stint in the games industry, and that was kind of like what I was shooting for the whole time. I was like, I need to work on the Elder Scrolls, especially when Oblivion came out. I was like, I gotta get in on this. So I joined while Skyrim was in production, and they had a sort of great wiki system going for the time, where the Elder Scrolls Online takes place a long time before the events of Skyrim. So the lore had to kind of fit, right? We couldn't write something. And they had a really kind of, which is a great magic wand to wave. You don't want to rely on it too much, but it was like, look, there are so many books written in the Elder Scrolls world. And so many of them contradict each other. Like some of them say that, like, Cyrodiil is nothing but forest or nothing but plains and whatever. And so, like, our fallback across the entire canon was always like, somebody wrote that, right? And that person was wrong, or they heard it secondhand, or they were being purposefully misleading or whatever. So, major events and like certain things, like, they were really into, you couldn't really mess with the Night Mother, the assassin stuff. There were certain areas that they were very like, okay, we got to be really careful about this stuff, but some of this other stuff, go nuts, right? Because they're either going to retrofit it later, or they're just going to say that maybe even the gaming experience was a figment of your imagination. Maybe you just interpreted it wrong. So when we were writing books, we had a pretty open canvas on what we could do, And I was a big fan of Morrowind, particularly the lore of Morrowind and all the weird stuff that like Michael Kirkbride came up with. So I loved working on like Shadowfen, right? And I wanted there to be like, okay, those worms that their transportation system, which is like a worm swallows you, and then the worm is 30 miles long, and you travel via peristalsis. The other end of the worm is in another city. Voila, you have just traveled via worm intestine from one place to another. I love that kind of stuff. Like, I wanted to lean into that weird Vivek stuff, that kind of stuff as much as possible. We couldn't so much. We had to be a little more, I want to say vanilla. But I do remember being like, oh, we're doing the Khajiit starter island. Okay, great. At the time, you had to go through the starter islands. And I was like, well, doing, what they were calling like acidification was a step in that process where you had to acidify areas. And I just remembered. So we would set up like little scripted scenes of things happening and make it look like there was life in the cities. And I remember thinking like, okay, well, the Khajiit definitely have to have like a dog in a cage, and they're treating this dog like it's the most ferocious thing ever, but it needs to look like a golden lab, like the most sort of the sweetest looking dog, not puppy, because we were like, nah, we don't have a puppy in a cage. That's a little full-grown dog, but like a golden lab that is just like looking at you like super friendly. And the Khajiit have like a carnival barker around it. They're like talking about its slavering fangs. I remember writing that and setting up that little scene in the middle of Kinarthi's Roost while everyone else on, the design team was doing important stuff. I was like, ooh, this would be funny when you find it. Let me look at a couple other stuff here. Yes, Madison, I agree. Here, let me get an ASMR thing that I can do while looking through this. Good morning, JC. Or good afternoon, where I am. Oh, cool. Uncle Dominic. It's changed a lot since I left. I left in like shortly after the console launch. So I was there for a lot of the development, a lot of the redevelopment, the PC launch and beta, and that long process, and then the PS4 launch. And I left shortly after that. In the middle of, I was working on the Rothgar. I was working on the Rothgar, the Orc expansion pack. And I can remember we were like, well, we were really trying to, the idea is that you were rebuilding Rothgar. And the problem was like, okay, so you're going through this process as you progress through the zone of rebuilding Rothgar. And we were trying to get away from the hub and spoke model, which was outdated even back then. So we didn't want you to keep running back to Rothgar and being like, okay, look, some more of Rothgar is rebuilt now. I go do a quest, come back to Rothgar. Ooh, more of Rothgar is rebuilt now. Sure, that works, and we wanted to include that in case you did go back to Rothgar, but we didn't want you to not see evidence of change in other places if you didn't. So I remember having this idea of like, and going to Lawrence Schick, who was our lead lore master at the time, and being like, could they have had aqueducts back then? Because if that's the case, and then statuary, and this would be across the entire Orsinium here. I'm sorry, Orsinium is the city. Sorry, I'm messing up my lore here. So we could do something where you have, aqueducts running across your horizon, wherever you happen to be within the zone. And those aqueducts, the state of those aqueducts would reflect sort of how much you've aided in the rebuilding of Orsinium. And so would like statuary in every village or city, right? Like, so it wouldn't just be Rothgar or Orsinium, gosh. I don't know if that was carried through or not. To be honest with you, I never played the expansion packs. Well, Katerina, you probably know this. I'm working on. I'm working on the infrastructure of a video, and it's pretty much done, and it really is just now to me to like light it and set it up right. But it's this thing that I've shown before, where I have the setup of. Where are we? Where is this? None of this is where it normally is. This thing, I'll only show a second of it. Pretty even light everywhere, pretty even teal light. So yeah, where I have, let me turn that down. Where I have a camera mounted on a tripod and a gimbal. I'm sorry, a camera mounted on a gimbal, which is mounted on a tripod, which has a LiDAR-based follow focus system, and then active track following where I am, so that I can not have a static framing shot. Or rather, I could have a static framing shot from one camera and then another camera doing this, sort of following me around, and I can kind of cut between them. But I feel like this kind of gives a more, just something to try. But I don't have, like, that set is not done. It's way too flat, the lighting. I need to work on the actual set, and it'll probably just be like a binaural doctor thing. I was so taken by Nathan Fielder's The Rehearsal, that series on HBO. So taken by the meta nature of that show, and how, like, he just doubled down. Like, you thought you knew what was coming, and then every episode he just was like, okay. The premise of The Rehearsal is, like, Nathan Fielder's like, you have to do difficult things in your life, and you only get one shot at them sometimes. So he wanted to find people who were like, had to have difficult things to do, and set up like OCD level recreations of like what that situation's going to be like. Famously, he has a little laptop on a Peak Design. Looks like he's got one of these Peak Design camera straps, which are these are the best camera straps. They're just fantastic. But set up to a laptop, and basically set up the situation beforehand using as much information as he could get, and then going through like all the possible ways in which it could go wrong, so that the person has a chance to rehearse for this difficult thing that they need to do. And it just goes, like, it takes that rather simple premise and it just goes nuts. It goes way off. And it keeps zooming. It becomes sort of uberotic. Is that a word? Can I say? Because erotic gets in there. But I mean like an uberos. But I guess that's probably not a word, because then uberotic sounds weird. But it starts to, become a commentary on itself, and he starts like questioning what he's doing and the values of what he's doing. And then he's like, well, maybe I need to do a rehearsal to kind of see when I'm talking with my actors, like if this is where it gets, like, the best way to watch that show is to go into it blind, and you watch the first episode and you think you know what is going to happen, and you don't. Like, it just gets really, really out there. And I think it's pretty brilliant. I just feel like this is a little dark, isn't it? Is this a little dark? I don't know if we lost some light somehow, or if I just judged this as the proper amount of light. All right, I'm going to do something here I might regret. Let's see, hopefully this doesn't reset my camera in some way. Yeah, just go up one notch. That seems a little more properly exposed. So I was thinking about doing some kind of ASMR video for that, where it presents itself as a generic ASMR video, kind of like the video. I have a video called a typical ASMR video, which does a similar kind of thing. But I'd like to kind of go into an ASMR video, present it as normal, then kind of stop in the middle and start to question what I'm doing, and then going into a rehearsal type scenario for the creation of that ASMR video, and just kind of see where it goes from there. Hey, you stay right there. But I don't know if where I am right now is the set that I have right now, if that's the right setup for that or not. Yes, Sophie Ego. Yeah. I mean, it was clear before he was outed as, a scumbag for lots of reasons that that book was a self-report, really. Oh, please tell Q I said hey. I can't wait to see their tattoo, actually, or maybe not. I don't know, depending on the tattoo. Do I like corpses? I mean, we're basically all corpses, right? Was this a reference to me using the word corpse as a verb? Hello, OK Rose. I mean, I have done bloopers videos. I don't like doing bloopers videos when the only bloopers are like you start laughing. Like, I like bloopers videos when something goes wrong, and if there's something like genuine that goes wrong, that's funny. But if the bloopers videos are just like you can't help but start laughing in the middle of something, to me that's boring to do. So probably, I mean, if it naturally happens. No, was. I left game development in 2017. And I have not looked back. That's not true. I look back occasionally. But in terms of compensation, work-life balance, toxic environments, etc., in those ways, I have not looked back, because game development is a great place to be if you want to be underpaid, overworked, and feel like you have no job stability, even after 20 years of doing it, which is less than. Oh, wow, you saw it. So it's still in there. Yeah, I wouldn't know. I can't. So I cannot do a collab with Ephemeral Rift again, because he does not answer my calls. Well, I worked on a lot. Like, I worked on every area in the early stages. ESO got sort of redone from start almost a few times. So I was all over. But, in terms of like the closest to finished product, kind of like if you go into, how am I blanking on this name? The zone before Deshaun. There's like these statues of these giant brothers fighting. That was me. Like, the idea behind that was me. Like, I liked coming up with interesting set pieces, and then sort of ideas for like why those set pieces came to be. Were these giants that turned to stone in the middle of a battle, or were these statues that were created? Like, the idea behind them was it was a really weird thing to have a statue of, and their origin might have been not just, hey, let's make statues of two cool looking people fighting. I have like 5 of these on my channel. Feel free to take a look around. Yes, that is what the hell these are. These are magnet beads. You can make whatever you want out of And they make a, I mean, some people like the sound. Do you not like the sound? I can switch to taking a Bob Ross fan brush, going at it. Yeah, it's strange. I had set up some time ago, I had actually set up an entire classroom with a few desks, right? And, you know, what looked like the front of a classroom there, with the intent of doing a sort of a teacher role play wherein, you know, I was treating active shooter drills in a satirically sort of glib way, as in, like, you know, I mean, kind of like almost how they've become. This was a couple of years ago, but I tried it, and I just felt like it was, no matter what I did with it, you know, the statement I was trying to make was how insane it is that this is normal or has been normalized. But it never came across that way to me. And it's not to say that, like, not every video that I make, it doesn't have to make some grand political statement. But, I mean, most of them try to make some kind of statement, apart from, you know. Oh, hey, kid. It has been a while. Yeah. Those questions will probably never go away. Oh, look at this. Got some lovely, lovely spam here. Hey, happy Kodiak. Hi from just outside of Washington, D.C. Yeah, well, I mean, I have mods. They're not here. I'm not going to be beholden to making sure that, like, I can only do streams when I have the proper number of mods. I can't make mods through, probably I thought you were a mod, but I can't make mods through Ecamm, so. But I banned that person. Kantara Bella, what do I do with all the props I use for my videos? Generally, I use them as decorations. Like, some of my criteria for, like, buying a prop is, will this look interesting sitting on a shelf somewhere, right? So, like, if I go somewhere and I see something that looks like it could be a cool prop, I'll want to test the sound of it, you know. I like the sound of that. It used to sound a little better. I think it's losing some of its spring tension, you know. But also, this looks kind of neat, just kind of sitting on a shelf somewhere. So a lot of times that factors into my prop selection process. Obviously, stuff like this just kind of sits around. Well, I always find it funny when Made in France says something nice about me. Maxence says something nice about me, because, like, the amount of effort I've put into every video I've ever done, I think, doesn't match the amount of effort he's put into one video. And he is just, like, he does things so differently. Like, I was so obsessed with depth of field, right? Like, for me, it was like, okay, we gotta have, like, a really wide open aperture on this stuff, right? Like, so I can just probably show you here. So, like, on this camera, this lens that's on this camera is a aperture f.9.95, right? So I wanted to use lenses like this all the time to make sure that everything was defocused as much as possible. I wanted to use really long focal lengths because generally in film, longer focal lengths tend to look more cinematic, and shorter focal lengths tend to look a little more music video, right? Is there any battery still in this? Oh, there is. Can I take a quick picture? It's good sound. So I was obsessed with like certain aspects of like how to make a video look cinematic. I think it took me way too long to come to the conclusion that like lighting was a lot more important than camera. And then it also took me way too long to come to the conclusion that you can use wide angle lenses and have super deep depth of field shots. Like I didn't even notice until like it was pointed out to me. You know, Made in Francis, most of his videos have really deep depth of field. It's almost infinite depth of field. He has his lens is set to infinity focus. So everything is in focus. To me, I would be like, no, you can't do that, right? But it just kind of showed me that I was wrong. He doesn't use or usually use a 180 degree shutter angle. He uses a 90 degree shutter angle. So like if his frame rate is 24 frames a second, his shutter speed will be 1/24th of a second. Whereas if you're going for a 180 degree shutter, it would be 1/50th of a second. You double the light to go to 1/24th, but then you have more motion blur than is typical in like most movies. But just showed how silly, to me, like it showed how silly those things were because he paid attention to the right things and still does. He just does awesome stuff. So, is this metal? No, this is not metal. I've used this before in videos. This is a resin skull. It makes kind of interesting noises when I have many skulls. I have many skulls in my collection. This one looks better than it sounds. And I have some that sound better than they look. Oh, that didn't sit good, did it? This doesn't really sound like glass, but it is. So I gotta be kind of careful there. Oh, that's actually better. Kind of like it like that. Really? Wow. Yeah, I mean, I remember like working on the temple a lot with the quest designer, trying to get that, to work properly and have the story told properly and have the right number of opportunistic quests there. There's one like where you have to destroy a bunch of books. And the designer that I worked on that with was, his name was Ed Stark, and he apparently, he worked on a bunch of RPG stuff and was at a bunch of conferences and had met George R.R. Martin multiple times. So Ned Stark, was there maybe is it possible that George R.R. Martin got that name from Ed Stark? Seems like it might be possible. It's possible that I worked with the guy who inspired the name, at least. He's a good guy. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to just like make more videos, but yeah. People come across content channels kind of in different times. New fans may ask about videos they have not seen. Oh, I know that. That's fine. I mean, I'm aware of that. I'm not angry at anyone for asking if I know who Ephemeral Rift is, or if I can do stuff with him. Answer is no. Oh, this is more aimed at, okay, yeah. Oh my God, this is so bizarre to me. And I don't even want to like ask like what percentage of teachers that you actually thought would literally take a bullet for you. I mean, they're not getting paid well. The problem is basically ignored. Especially depending on the ages of the kids. It's just like, what a terrible thing. Yeah, a lot of Ephemeral Rift requests here. Okay, let me get down here. I listen to ASMR every night. Like, I cannot go to sleep without it. I'm not so into, right, so there's a lot of newer ASMRs, like the chaotic ASMR. I'm not so into that. Ironically, I'm also not so into ASMR that I technically or from a perspective of creativity admire. Like, if I'm watching an ASMR video with the purpose of falling asleep, I kind of don't want to be that interested by it. So it really all comes down to the person's voice, what they're doing. So, let's see, I mean, I love accents, right? So I listen to a lot of people with accents. That does it for me. English, Australian. I still listen to Massage ASMR. He's in my rotation. This is weird, but I still listen to Ardra ASMR. Like, when it comes to voices, like, I think she pretty much has one of the best, if not the best, ASMR voices. I listen to, I'm trying to think who's on the. Like, I get tired and then I have to shift to a new group, so I like just make playlists and then I listen to those for a while. I listen to Lloyd's ASMR, but it's weird. Like, the reason I listen to Lloyd's ASMR is because, yeah, it does the job, which is, it bores me, which sounds like an insult, but that's the intent, right? I listen to Miss Chloe ASMR. I really like she's into photography and plants and stuff, so I like listening to the videos where she's talking about cameras. But like, I do occasionally listen to like Made in France, but generally if I listen to Made in France, I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh man, look at that. And I'm trying to tell what sounds are folied and what sounds aren't. And it makes it difficult for me to fall asleep to. So I didn't realize you're still in frame there. So I generally need stuff that's like sort of just less compelling to me in a way. I think that's probably right. Like, I mean, it's depending on what you mean by, better. But there is a look that 35 millimeter film gives where it manages to keep everything nice and creamy and even, but still very defined. There's still a lot of definition. and the grain is the right size. Like, I even like Super 16 or 16 millimeter. I understand some people think like that grain is too big. I like the fine grain that you get in Super 35. But digital grain is not the same as analog grain, obviously. So, yeah, there you go. As far as trigger, soft speaking, whispering, really, that's what does it for me. I mean, I particularly like when Massage ASMR does his unintelligible ASMR, where he's just kind of. But I don't like just straight up mouth sounds, even though really you could argue that those are kind of just straight up mouth sounds. So go figure. Uh, 2014, I believe. So it's been 8 or 9 years, I think. I don't know the exact date. I can find out, which I won't do right now, but I think it's been 8 or 9 years. A day in the life of me would be pretty boring. I work, have kids, I live on my own. I play guitar a lot. I play guitar, video games, ASMR, listening to a lot of podcasts on things of interest to me or my professional life. And I do, the Beyond the Double Red Door stuff. So I do a weekly podcast every Wednesday at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. So yeah, a day in the life of me would be pretty boring. Oh, this call doesn't have a name. Should probably give it a name, but it doesn't have one right now. Yeah, I know. This is interesting. You get tingles just thinking about ASMR. There have been like tons of studies that show that like thinking about something gives you a lot of the same benefits as actually doing it. So like even I've used this like with guitar practicing as well. It's like thinking about practicing the guitar when like say you can't practice guitar is actually quite beneficial. Right? So I'm not surprised. I don't get tingles really either. I will once in a very long while I might get a tingle, and I don't know, I can't track down where it's from, but that's not why I listen to ASMR. I do miss the tingles, but really it's about shutting up the voices, the unborn chicken voices in my head, so that I can get to sleep without worrying about stuff, which is spend a lot of my time just worrying about things. Scenarios going through my head over and over, not letting me sleep until I'm exhausted. And I am just like a wreck in the morning. My day basically starts with me waking up and being like, oh my God, how am I going to get through this day? And then as the day goes on, I feel better and better. I tend to feel best at night, ironically. Or maybe not ironically. Jonathan. I did a lot. I was in it for a while. So I started doing art. Actually, I started in QA and then was doing art and animation. Did character animation on the Civilization series, Civilization 2, some of the expansion packs. And then some early PlayStation 2 stuff. But it became clear to me that I wasn't a good enough artist. Like back in the day, I was a pixel artist and I was decent at that, and I was a 3D box modeler, and I could, if you were like make me a car with 300 polygons and one 256 by 256 texture, I could do that. But if you said make me a car with, 300,000 polygons using, surface material characteristics, and basically like the more restrictions that were removed, the more it became clear to me that, I'm not good enough to keep up with people who are actually really talented artists. So I had joined a friend of mine at a startup around the turn of the century, well after the turn of the century. And we were working on a game, and there was no one to design the game. And we were like, who was going to design this game? And it's funny, we actually reached out to Yahtzee, Ben Crenshaw. What's his? I forget his real name. To do the game design, because at that time he had done like a bunch of these adventure games, like 5 Days of Stranger or something like that, and I loved those. And so I was like, hey, maybe we get this guy to design our game. He priced himself out, and so then I was like, well, I could do it. And then I did it, and I've told the story a bunch of times. The first game that I ever wrote and designed was a SpongeBob adventure game called Employee of the Month, and Computer Gaming World nominated it for Adventure Game of the Year. It got honorable mention. It lost to, and then it got an Academy of Interactive Art and Sciences nomination for Family Game of the Year. The first game I ever wrote and designed. And then I was like, wow, maybe I'm really good at this. If my first game got this kind of attention, who knows what my next games will get. And then none of the other ones got anything. It was just a matter of timing and luck, and sort of the cultural rocket that was SpongeBob in the early aughts. I mean, that thing took off. So, and I did scripting, some Python and VBA, but never did any real programs. But I did do some scripting, right? Like a lot of the adventure game work that I did was all script based. So when I worked on when we did this Agatha Christie series of games, and then there were none, Evil Under the Sun, Murder on the Orient Express, and I was the project director on those. But what that really meant was, I did some of everything, but most of it was making sure the game was on track. And a lot of that meant okay, somebody's going to have to go in and script these in-scene animations, or sort of arrange the sort of cuts to close-ups and do the really primitive lip syncing that we were doing at that time. That was all done through a proprietary scripting system. So doing a bunch of that stuff, in addition to, we had a game designer on that who was sort of approved by the Agatha Christie Corporation, but he wasn't on site. And so he wrote an initial game design doc and then checked in with us a couple times. But just being totally honest here, I rewrote a lot of what was actually recorded and what actually came up there, because it wasn't you can't just write a game design doc and then that's it, it's done, right? There's so many things that change through the course of developing a game that you have to have people there live, sort of making those decisions, and then the decisions that it becomes like a dominoes, right? There's one decision you make affects 30 decisions down the line, and then you've got a whole by the time you get down that line, you've changed a shit ton of what was originally written. So yeah, that was fun. So getting to write dialogue for David Suchet, who played Poirot on the BBC series for many, many years, was great. And he recorded a funny answering machine message for me, which I appreciated. And writing for SpongeBob was fun too, because that was not just Tom Kenny, but also, forgetting his name, Mr. Krabs, and the guy who does Plankton. And then for the movie version, like Scarlett Johansson did Mindy, right? So, and then in ESO, we were writing for like Kate Beckinsale and Bill Nighy, and so that was all. It's fun to like write something and then hear somebody be like, "Hey, I put words in that celebrity's mouth. That celebrity spent 15 seconds saying something that I wrote." Feels cool to me. So I miss that stuff. I miss the end product when it comes to like working on games. I miss like having a meeting for 2 hours about this. I recall this very specifically, like this very protracted meeting that we had, and the meeting subject was, should skeletons have loot? I remember that this was something that because a loot system in a multiplayer game is much more complicated than a loot system in a single player game. So there was pushback on things like, well, skeletons just carry what you see, because you have to make sure that you're balancing the experience of every area that you're going through so that your progression curve is operating the way you want it to, right? So to just be like, no, people only carry what you see them having, that is I think from the player experience point of view, the clear, correct answer to that is, yeah, no, skeletons don't have pockets, right? You shouldn't kill a worm. Even a worm, you could be like, well, maybe this stuff was in its stomach, right? Ghosts should not drop gold, right? Maybe a ghost is carrying a weapon that it's using to attack you with. It should drop that weapon. We ended up, I think, going more with what you see is what you get. But I'm sure, I'd have to go back and play it. I don't know. But I remember having this really long meeting on essentially, do skeletons have pockets? And I was on the side of, no, skeletons should not have pockets. I've done this a bunch of times. I've, shot in a bunch of places that was not my house. Hotel rooms, mostly hotel rooms, B&Bs. Rented out the Philadelphia State Penitentiary for several hours, but didn't get anything out of that. Did some outdoors. Someplace I wish I could film in. The problem is I would need to be alone there, or just with the people that I'm working with. And most of these places that offer that kind of stuff, they have to have a chaperone with you. So I would love to shoot again at the Philadelphia State Penitentiary, but unsupervised. That would have to be the provisos. No, there's not somebody watching me, because that's just embarrassing. Yes, I've played guitar since I was a young boy. You can probably see I have a couple right here sitting there. So I rarely, a day never goes by unless I'm physically not able to play. But yeah. No, I don't like Terrar. That has more to do with his behavior as a human being. I don't find him to be of high moral character. So, no. I think he's a piece of shit. Yeah, I used to watch Water Whispers quite a bit too. I think I she stopped making content, and then I maybe stopped watching her stuff after a while. But yeah, Massage ASMR doing Dimitri, like in his ruffling his frills thing, right? That he had to kind of get past the, well, this is like slightly silly, right? And he was able to do that, right? And I think that's great. No, I have not. See, I haven't played it enough to give a really good opinion of it. I want to. The time investment just seems like a lot, so I'm a little bit reluctant to fully dive in there, you know. But I'm sure I will ultimately, and I'm sure I'll love it. Yeah, Shani's great. She does incredible costuming. I'm in awe of like her Cruella. Looks just like Cruella. My favorite podcast. This is another thing that like varies a lot. I listen a lot to like The Best Show. Any podcasts that have to do with artificial intelligence or machine learning, I'll listen to. I don't have like I used to listen to revisionist history, but I've sort of come to dislike Malcolm Gladwell, so I don't do that anymore. Oh, this is awesome, Kintara. Yeah. Yes. Similarly, and probably like the reason I prefer stuff like guitar over or piano over violin, or I like self-accompanying instruments. Right? I've never been able to get into binaural beats, though. Ban. I promise you, I'm not that interesting. I'm pretty boring. I'm quite an introvert. Well, see, this is interesting that you say this, a dogman, because I didn't really feel much stability in AAA. There was still like, there was always this kind of specter of, layoffs, always. Even at, the bigger companies, there's always like the specter of layoffs in game dev, and sort of remorseless. And I've experienced them a few and had survivor's guilt. Like I've experienced we have an all hands meeting in the theater today. You go to it and you notice not everybody's there. And then somebody comes in and says, if you're in this room, you still have a job. So even if you're not the one laid off, like being in that kind of a culture is pretty shitty. Oh, well, that's very kind. I did that before I saw the movie, so I didn't really know what I was basing it on. It was very much like a one-off. Like I didn't put a whole lot of thought into it. Had I known that it would be as successful as it was, I probably would have put more thought into it, and then it probably wouldn't have been very successful. So, but thank you. I don't have it anymore, Pivy. It was him going, this is Hercule Poirot, and this person, say my name, is not at home because his house has burned down. It was like a funny kind of passive-aggressive thing because I tried to slip it in there. And he was like, oh, I see what you're doing. How about this? Oh, I don't think that's. I mean, that's nice to say, right? Like, I think he probably got the majority of his inspiration from, just shared interests, right? And he really goes all out. Like I refuse. I try to like cast myself as a purist. Like I'm not going to use After Effects. I'm not going to put fake stuff in my sets or whatever. Like everything that you see is real, right? But really, what that is like it's a lot of work. And early on I tried to do some of that stuff. I did a video where I played a bartender in a role playing game who was really like, it was kind of a meta commentary on what NPCs do when there's nobody around. Reminded me a little bit of that Free Guy movie that came out, right? But I mean, that concept has been around forever, right? And that took a lot of work. And, and then I did a video early on where it was just puppets. And that was a lot of work. And if I kept doing stuff like that, honestly, I just don't think that I would like it so much. I think I would burn out. Honestly, if I could have it my way, I would just do live stuff. Like live stuff is the easiest and most fluid sort of stuff for me to do that I enjoy doing. And I do enjoy doing it until it becomes sort of a chore. I'm picking my nose on stream. Until it becomes a chore, right, or an obligation, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, now I have to do it. And the moment I have to do something, then I start to not want to do it anymore. So it's a weird conundrum. I have to sort of make myself feel as if I'm just doing it for the heck of it. And then, it's a lark. It's not important. It's not my job, right? So that helps. Like I used to, early on, I was like, wow, it'd be great if ASMR could be my job. But I think anything that becomes my job, regardless of how much I like it, I will start to hate. So I'd rather have hobbies I enjoy and a job I can tolerate. Like when I was in game dev, I rarely played games. And when I played games, it would be, because I had to keep up with what was the latest stuff. Now I enjoy playing games much more. I started playing through The Last of Us Part 1. I was live streaming. I live streamed that last night. We'll probably live stream more of it. Well, maybe not today, but maybe today. I don't know. Soon. I'm enjoying it. Yeah, sorry. I did not watch the show. So I did play the game. I love the games. I played the second one and the third one. Didn't play the first one. I loved both. I thought the third one was, really boundary pushing when it came to world building and putting a lot of effort into set pieces, like isolated moments. In Elder Scrolls, often there's like a focus on creating reusable content. And that means you lose some of the idiosyncrasies that make something really feel like it's of a particular place. When you're running around in Elder Scrolls Online, you're seeing a lot of the same buildings kind of plopped onto this sort of tablecloth that is the ground beneath it. You're going into a lot of caves that are copy-pastes of the same caves. The Witcher, like the entire Witcher 3, at least the entire world is built in 3 Studio Max or whatever they used, Maya or Max or whatever. But you can see that just when you see like how well everything, when you go into the cities, intersects with each other. It doesn't look like somebody took a building and like sunk it into a rock and then took another building and kind of sunk it into a rock, covered up the seams with, patches of grass and called it a day. There's like, you can see where the building touches the ground, and then there's like chunks of rock that fell off that building and how it integrates with the ground beneath it. And it just looks so much more bespoke to me than something like Skyrim. I'm sure Starfield will be. I know a bunch of people working on Starfield. I'm sure I'm going to love it. I loved Fallout 4. Yeah, I get this. Yeah. I agree. But, I just don't really. I much prefer doing this to doing that. It's much more. I'm starting to get ASMR from this. What else do I got? This thing that I made out of a piece of air duct, but I wanted it to kind of. I was going to use this as like a Foley device. It makes interesting noises. Reminds me of like Jiffy Pop popcorn. Almost like a fire, really. These are actually a Christmas tree decoration. They're grapes. But they reflect light well, which is another. It's like one of those balls that you squeeze and then the parts pop out. Like pieces of distended colon. Yeah, I've heard of Babylon 5. I never watched it. I never got into Babylon 5. I enjoy some anime. I mean, you could probably guess. I like Junji Ito a lot. Tomei. Spiral. What is it called? Spiral? I mean, obviously I love, Princess Mononoke and Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro, stuff like that. Uzumaki, yeah, that's right. Rama 1/2. I despise superhero movies and generally superhero comics. Don't appreciate them at all. For much the same reason I don't like the kind of fantasy that bandies around magic. When you have no risk, I have no investment. And if you are Superman, I don't really care what you do. But I love The Boys, in part because it sort of like took a realistic take on one if somebody really had that kind of power. How could you not become Homelander? And then the way they took that in what to me seemed like a Trumpian nod, where he finally, the mask slipped and he showed to the public the horror that he really was. And for a moment he was like, oh no. But the public didn't give a fuck. The public was like, hey, yeah, you're right. You are better than we are. You are special. You should be able to do whatever it is that you want. And bizarrely enough, I became sort of enamored of the shit show that was The Deep. And his it just seemed like his character was, here's what happens when you have no moral compass and you buy into your own hype, and you have no ability to be introspective whatsoever. So yeah, I really enjoyed The Boys. I watched all of The Boys. Binge watched it when I had COVID a few weeks ago. Yeah, Billy Butcher roleplay would be great. I'd have to gain about 40 pounds of muscle to even... Maybe I could just light it really darkly or something. We'll see. Oh, man, that's a good question. Yeah, maybe. This question gets asked a lot. That's sort of a joke. I could put it at the bottom of the screen. No more ephemeral rift collabs. Yeah, I'm very tempted to do another ASMR video as Jordan Peterson. I mean, the one that I did is like 4 years old. So he's done so much disgusting stuff since then. There's so much more material to mine. But I do get a lot of pushback because I pay too much attention to the guy. Really, I should just ignore him, but he gets under my skin in this kind of unique way. It's hard for me not to. I really like Darkman. I mean, that's Sam Raimi, isn't it? So that's an interesting directorial pedigree, and that's before superhero movies were the behemoths that they are now, where it's just like, how many cuts can you do in a minute? How many witty characters can you have commenting on a situation in that time? How much CGI can you pack into here? How much pathos can you ignore? I enjoyed Logan. And I enjoyed Joker. Well, obviously, that's why I did videos on those. Because I don't really count those as superhero movies. I enjoyed... I enjoyed the original Batman, but I was pretty young at the time. I'd have to go back and watch it through my aged, cynical eyes. See if it still does it for me. Don't know that it would. Oh, hey, Miz. How are you doing? Another non-notification. I mean, this is just par for the course, I think, with YouTube at this point. People seem to complain about nobody seems to be getting notified of my content. And that's, I think, working as intended. People are subscribed to thousands of people. If you got a notification every time somebody you subscribed to did something, I think you'd probably pretty quickly either mass unsubscribe or turn off notifications. So, whoops, meant to turn off my phone. Oh, that's not good. I saw the Artemis launch was scrapped again. Hopefully that gets resolved soon. I want to go to the moon. Cawthon, I have this mic going through a compressor and through I forget the name of the preamp, but it's a good AD preamp. And I've got some EQ going on with it to sort of accentuate some of the sibilance in my voice, but not all of it. So it's optimized for my voice. It's not necessarily optimized for this kind of thing, but it seems to be all right. I like these. They're a bit loud. It's interesting. I spend a fair amount of time just like looking through these sort of self-stimming textural objects that are intended for people on the spectrum. But man, I self-stim all the time. I'm always like doing something. I think we all may, I don't want to marginalize the people dealing with autism. Certainly in their more disruptive forms, right? But I feel like there might have been, environmental factors that contribute to all of us having some kind of, or a lot of us having some kind of anxiety, coping deficiency that can be ameliorated with, strangely, simple things like this. To some extent, anyway. Cawthon, are you sick? Jordan Peterson is a vibe? I guess maybe I'm not, up to date with the nomenclature there, but that has positive connotations, from my understanding, that I don't agree with. Infinity Cube? You mean these? I literally have a video that's like 3 years old called Infinity Cube ASMR. And I thought that thing was going to be a hit because when I found these, I was like, oh my God. These are just like the Rubik's Magic things that I had as a kid. Except instead of long planes, they are cubes. And yeah, I played with the heck out of these things. The metal ones hold up better, and I think they sound better too. Just what are we? I don't know. They sound pretty good in my in-ear monitors. digging it. Shit, I could probably do that for a long time. I thought this would be a hit. Wasn't. I hubristically predicted 1 million views. Some amount of tongue and some amount of cheek. Alas, this did not happen. And when I did the Joker video, I remember thinking, wow, that was a thrown together piece of shit. That's not going to do anything. The only video I think I have that did well, that I actually put a lot of work into, was the binaural barber video. Like, apart from that, not really a correlation between the amount of work I put into a video and how well it does or does not do. Like lately, all my videos are just 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10, I mean like bottom of the ranking. Least viewed video of my last 10 videos. Yeah. You know, to everything there is a season. I can choose to give up, or I can choose to just continue and hope that eventually things turn around, or I can try and change things up a little bit, which doing to some extent. Really what it's doing is, like I said earlier in the video, in case you didn't catch this, is, I was used to be very precious about what things I did on this channel versus like a side channel. And I think I just need to relax those reins a bit and not worry so much about it. People who like it will stick around. People who don't, like, why am I pretending like it's useless to to rely on subscribers as some kind of validation when those subscribers are really just subscribers because they forgot they subscribed to you. And it used to be much easier, I think, to get subscriptions for people to subscribe. Like right now, feeds are so full of stuff, there isn't really a need to subscribe as much. You'll find the algorithm will sort of dynamically serve you what it wants. And more often than not, something there will be in line with what you want. So unless you really resonate with a person as a person, I subscribe far less often than I used to. I try to keep my subscriptions below 200. Which at one point would seem like a lot. But I think it's not very much at all. I'm glad you're recovering, Nasha. Hi. Wait, what is this? Large wild cats. Is this Tiger King Fallout? What is? This is not a trend that I have noticed, so I can't really speak to it. Personally, I own no pets. It's a very lonely life here in the Phoenician sailor house. A lot of skulls. Probably have at least 10 skulls. More than that if you don't count human. I think people do when they do actively now. But I think if someone subscribed to me 4 years ago or 5 years ago, they're just as likely as not to no longer be hip to the jive I'm slinging, if you get what I mean. Yes, I've heard this. But YouTube subscriptions are not real points of contact. They're parasocial. So you can have hundreds of thousands of them. Hey, Giga Chad. I'm guessing that you're... Oh, look at that profile picture. If that's actually you... I gotta... bust that. Getting the vapors. Getting the vapors from Giga Chad's profile picture. Actually feels pretty nice. Ooh, hey. Who says wind sounds can't be relaxing? Well, really, who did say that? Well, of course I don't mean you, Ms. Of course I don't mean you. A downbeat exigent. Not really. I've done some voiceover work for a couple of indie filmmakers. In fact, one that's coming out. I did one with Atlas. I think there's some fundraiser going on for it right now on Instagram. With a guy named Brady Jacquin, or Brady Jacquin, Jacquin. I already recorded the audio for it with Atlas, which was a lot of fun. Oh, interesting. Hey, Olevi, how are you doing? I don't like how easy it is to be manipulative in a form of entertainment. I think it's obvious and people see it and are just avoiding all of the internet set systems at the moment. Strong corruption. Huh. I can't say that I 100% know what you're talking about there, but you seem to feel quite strongly about it. So, you keep being you. Olevi, I hope that you're okay. It has been a bit since I've seen you. Well, it's not that easy, is it? And I don't know, it's not really something I want to, have be a job or anything, you know? Chef Mittens, it's funny that you remember that. No, I definitely don't have any background in comedy. I do have a lifetime of being cynical and having a dry sense of humor that's so dry that I get criticized for it quite a bit because I have people tell me that they don't know when I'm joking or not because the inflection of my voice does not change. Deadpan humor is best pan humor. So. With that glugging, it's kind of ASMR-y. It's like that Calvin and Hobbes strip, ASMR. You can find it anywhere. Just look hard enough. Yeah, I've thought about doing some Sweeney Todd thing before. It does seem like it would be a lot of effort. But yeah, it's a good idea. A few years ago, so like 7 years ago. Oh, that's cool. That was your introduction. That makes me happy. You do realize that in that video you're being shaved to be electrocuted by the state, and that it is an anti-capital punishment video. I hope you know that. No, you. ASMR is what made me get. Oh, no, that's not what I clicked. Ecam, you're being troublesome here, Ecam. ASMR is what got me into ASMR. Was that ZeniMax? Somebody passing around a gentle whispering video with the intent of making fun of it, and I listened to it and I didn't think it was funny at all. I thought it was great. I hope I don't get anyone too worked up about Sweeney Todd. It's not high on my list of priorities, and it's unlikely I will get even to my list of priorities. So I don't want to make any promises about it. Probably no chance of a collab with Dr. T. He's in with Terrar. And I'm generally avoid anything that Terrar is involved with. Because I don't like being involved with things, with people who are, who I think are morally corrupt people. This is interesting, right? This is, talking about the Evie the Voight-Kampf test, right? Like, that was a video that I was just like, this is dumb. This looks stupid. This thing looks stupid. This idea is stupid. Nobody's going to know what this is. I think one other person had done an audio-only Voight-Kampf test. Epic ASMR, I think was his name. I'm speaking like he's dead. Don't think he is. He's still actually doing stuff. But it's interesting, that one ended up doing fairly well, and I was shocked and surprised. I will say this, it was a long time ago. And I think originally what happened was maybe some drama, maybe. But there was also like a proclivity for certain kind of behavior that rubbed me the wrong way. And then, I wouldn't say low moral character if it was just like, oh man, he said something crappy about this guy. But when we're talking about like spamming with alt accounts to try and bring somebody down, and other stuff too that I just probably don't want to get into. I just would never work with anyone who worked with him. Oh. I think this is satire we're experiencing here from, I don't know about this, fuck off YouTube. I hope so. Now I'm starting to think this is a joke. I don't speak with Ephemeral Rift. I haven't in years. I've made my peace with it. I reached out to him. He did not respond, and I do not go over. I don't want, once something like that happens, it's like, okay, balls in your court, man. I still don't really know what happened. Like, I don't know. I did something to upset him. I know that. But I don't know what it was. I can guess, but I don't know what it was. Oh no, I understand what you're saying here, Evie. Yes, and I agree. Like, and that was probably why that video did okay, right? And it's like the basis of a lot of Dr. T's videos, right? So, it's not generally my bag, but maybe someday. The control video I did was like an entire a panoply of what are essentially like SCP objects, right? So you might like that one. Just search for control. Oh, hi, you're back. Ban. This is a tough question. Changes from day to day, from week to week. I listen to a fairly wide swath of genres. I'm a fan of. I'm a product of my time. So, like, I'm a fan of, like, a lot of 90s and early aughts stuff. From Fugazi, Shudder to Think, Modest Mouse, Sun Kill Moon, Red House Painters, The Cure, The Smiths, that stuff. But then a lot of metal, too. Some of the newer metal, I really enjoy Leprous' work, so I will listen to like almost any Leprous song, particularly put on The Sky is Red and just kind of zone out. High on Fire, Sleep, more folksy stuff as well. Classic rock sometimes, It's hard for me to listen to stuff like Pink Floyd anymore, right? Like, and that stuff, I've heard it so much in my life that I just feel like I don't need to hear it anymore. But I do like watching reaction videos to that stuff, which is weird. Well, Evie, if you have not listened to Leprous, you should. They are Norwegian, but apart from that, they are very prog. And they have an incredible drummer. Question. Well, yeah, a bit. I purposely don't, like, even in my channel description, I don't mention ASMR. I don't have ASMR in my name. But yeah, there are things that you can't do, but it's not that limiting. And I enjoy frameworks, right? I enjoy, like, trying to find ways around things or ways to do things within frameworks, right? And sometimes those limitations spawn ideas that you wouldn't have thought of, and they can help you. I think of like Christopher Nolan's The Following. I'm absolutely zero way comparing myself to Christopher Nolan. But all the limitations that he had, a lot of the big, like Darren Aronofsky too, when he made Pi, like a lot of those limitations ended up really working to the benefit of the finished product. And they're things that, probably wouldn't have been done if those limitations didn't exist. So, and that's speaking more broadly in that I don't think those kinds of limitations are necessarily a bad thing, and you can thrive within those limitations. And, that becomes part of the challenge, is how are you using those limitations the best way that you can. Yeah, King Gizzard I have listened to. I'm not quite as into them as most people seem to be. Let's see, their live album. I'll check that out. Oh, Levy, life is a wave. Just ride it. I like it. Finally, somebody asks a gear question. I've come to feel like, especially now, the camera you choose is less and less important for its IQ and more for what it is designed to do. I feel like if you take the latest generation of like Panasonic camera, like the S1, and then the latest generation of Blackmagic cameras, the latest generation of Canon cameras, their image qualities are all relatively comparable. And then what it really comes down to is like, what features do you need? Is size an issue? Do you need ND filters? Like what are the features that they provide or don't provide? I mean, I'm using Blackmagic cameras here. I don't need autofocus because I'm sitting in one place. I'm using a Blackmagic camera in the gimbal setup downstairs. All Blackmagic cameras, the Blackmagic 4K is their entry-level camera. Essentially, it's $1,000. But for a camera that shoots Blackmagic RAW and ProRes and has the ability to create the image that it has, that's cheap. My main camera is still a Canon C200, and that does have autofocus. And it also shoots a form of RAW called Canon RAW Lite. That's a more expensive camera. But like I said, it does have autofocus, it has internal NDs, stuff like that. Caligula's Horse and Richelieu. Okay. I will check that out. Oh, you're right about this, Evie. Yeah. Even just saying that, I hear the sound in my head, and I think, I saw Nope. I was disappointed. But my expectations were pretty high. So, but I even think if my expectations had not been high, I don't think Nope just didn't really do much for me. Like, what was there wasn't like I feel like Get Out and Us had a sort of core theme that they were exploring using horror tropes, and I'm not sure what the core theme of Nope was. And it wasn't really a horror movie. It was more like an action adventure movie. It's more along the lines of like a Spielberg film, which I like Spielberg films, but that's not what I thought I was on board for. And of course, Jordan Peele can do whatever he likes. Right? I don't have to like it. Well, guess that went over my head. Much like you know what I mean, right? Went over my head. Get it? You get it? Get it? No? Don't get it? Maybe I need to watch it again. Maybe I wasn't in the right frame of mind when I watched it. I don't know. Maybe I should have seen it on the big screen. I'm not sure. But yep, I saw Nope. But nope, I was not enthralled by it. And I felt like it telegraphed a lot. Like really telegraphed a lot. And I was like, okay, so this is, all right. I know this is going to come back here, and I know I see things, and then I know this is going to happen in the denouement. Yeah. I don't know, man. Maybe. Or maybe the film's just not that deep. Okay. I don't know. Not that compelling to me, I guess. Don't know. I don't know. I enjoyed Kiki Palmer and Daniel, I forget how to pronounce his name. I thought they were good. Those are really the only two characters I sort of formed any kind of bond with. There was a Scott Glenn lookalike character who was like the producer guy, right? Who reminded me of the wide-brimmed hat guy that was in Tiger King, who did all the filming there. But yeah, maybe I need to watch it again. Favorite games. What are my favorite games of all time? I have to put Morrowind on there. Morrowind is one of my favorite games of all time. Subverting traditional fantasy tropes. And it's ironic to me that their follow-up to Morrowind was one of the most vanilla fantasy tropey games ever, Oblivion. And then they went more interesting with Skyrim. I have high hopes for Starfield. Huge Mass Effect fan, but Mass Effect really owes a lot to Star Control. Star Control really owes a lot to Starflight. Huge original Bard's Tale series fan. That was probably the series of games that really got me into role-playing games and the SSI games that followed, like Pool of Radiance, Curse of the Azure Bonds. Huge System Shock fan. System Shock 2, of course, going into BioShock. Ken Levine. I'm kind of talking about like AAA games here. One of my favorite games that I ever played, and it's so made for, and it used to be on Apple products, but then it wasn't supported anymore, and it got disappeared. There's a game by Zachtronics, who they make a lot of cool indie games, called Space Chem. And there are games kind of like Space Chem, where you're essentially like kind of doing low-level or high-level programming to progress the game. Human Resource Manager, I think, by the people that did World of Goo. But Space Chem to me was just on another level. was great. I loved Soma. Soma, like story-wise, Soma was one of my favorite games that I've ever played. Strictly from a narrative perspective. I'd really have to think about it a little more, right? Shadow of the Colossus. Shadow of the Colossus really pushed the genre forward and like did so much with. I don't want to say they did so much with so little, because they had a lot, but managed to speak volumes through a form of minimalism, and also really kind of spearheaded this idea of like, what is a level, right? What is an enemy? Like kind of the same things BioShock explored, right? Like, why are you doing the things that you're doing? Like, why are you doing whatever whatever Atlas asks you to do in BioShock? Shadow of the Colossus was very much the same thing. Like, why are you killing these colossi? They're not hurting you. So you're being told that this person is going to be brought back to life if you kill the colossi. But, and you kill a colossi, and it's like a funeral dirge when you do it. Makes you feel horrible. I have trouble getting into JRPGs. I just have trouble. I did like The World Ends With You, and I was playing, early Final Fantasy stuff I enjoyed. But I'm more into sort of open world, exploration based Western RPGs. I loved the early Fallouts, and I loved Fallout 3. And I loved New Vegas too. Anything by Obsidian I have liked. So that's sort of my wheelhouse, probably. No, I loved The Last of Us, right? That's why I'm replaying it. I wouldn't be replaying it if I didn't really like it. I liked Kingdom Hearts a lot. Hey, Warp Raven, how are you doing? Yeah, I remember watching like how much light they required, an insane amount of light to get the effects that they wanted with that camera. For the video, I used the Canon C200. I exposed, everything was very bright. So like right now, like if you were to walk into this room and see me, I'm pretty much at the same level of exposure that you're seeing here. And a lot of times you can tell if you like look at certain either pictures or scenes, and you see people's pupils are just super tiny, even though it looks kind of dark where they are. It means probably that scene was a lot brighter than it ended up looking like. So I did use a lot of light in that video. And there's a weird difference that you get, which you might not think you'd get. Like if you use a large amount of light and then stop down your camera or increase the shutter speed or lower the ISO to get an equivalent level of exposure as you would, and I'm not talking about depth of field, I'm talking about there's still a different look that you get if you have a lot more light in the scene and you're exposing for that light than if you have a low light scene and you're exposing for that light. I'm talking about even if you get those histograms to look relatively similar. The light behaves differently. So I think I was getting more harsh shadows and a little more micro contrast because of the amount of light that I was shooting at myself. So that was really like the only difference in technique that I used for the Lighthouse video. It's interesting. I don't use green screens. The last time I think I used a green screen would be... I think the last time I used a green screen was for a Westworld roleplay. But generally, whatever you see me in front of, it's been years since I've used a green screen. I just don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy the work that requires. I was remarking on this in the playthrough of Last of Us Part 1 last night. And I found it really interesting. For instance, the Ellie-Joel dynamic in the beginning of Last of Us Part 1. Like, I didn't really see I felt like they could have used a little more animus at the beginning that they would then have to work to overcome. And I didn't really see the motivation for that, even though they behaved like, they didn't like each other. So I felt like they could have shown something happening that would have caused Ellie and Joel to dislike each other a little more. Whereas like Last of Us 2 went the opposite direction and gave you like every reason in the world to dislike a particular character, and then spent the rest of the game seeing if they could get you to sympathize with that character, which I hated at first. And then as I got to the end, I at least had some grudging respect for that effort. It was pretty neat. So I very much liked Last of Us Part 2, even though there were parts of that game where I was like, I am not enjoying this one freaking bit. I do not want to play as this person. I don't want to... You expect me to like try and help this person not die, right? Like, and then closer to the end, I was like, okay, yeah, that's a neat trick that you were able to get me to actually have such a profound change in my thought process around this person. So I was impressed by it, but in the end of the day, I mean, I still resonated with Last of Us Part 1 more. I mean, I used a histogram for that in waveforms. Because it was raw, I was like overexposing myself a bit. That's really the only difference. And then it came down to, in post, sort of increasing the shadow tonality, lifting the shadows more than I maybe normally would, and then increasing the sharpness in the mids, so that like you can almost see my pores, I think, in that video, which is like really what I wanted. And then it was just like little things, like making sure I had things that sparkled. Like I made sure I had like, insignia stuff on my jacket, things that, would catch that light. And those are the moments where you can see how bright that light is, because when the light catches them, there are like flares from that. And then I also used a black pro mist filter on the lens to increase those flares. I use a black pro mist filter a lot. I'm not using one now, but I do use those a lot. Okay, guys. I am starving. I've been starving like for the last hour. I didn't realize that I hadn't eaten lunch. So I'm gonna end now. But thank you all for hanging out this afternoon. It was fun. And I hope to see you all later or soon. Take care.